The way I start my day is usually up by 5:30 a.m., dressed, get the dogs outside, let them do their business. Once they get back in the house, they get fed. Then I fill up the coffee pot with fresh water, head out to the shop, open the door, get the lights turned on. Very first thing, get my coffee pot on, fire up the computer, and generally for about the first hour, give or take, of the day, I am going through internet, knife forums, emails, things like that. One of the reasons some folks would ask, how come I spend an hour on this computer every morning? Part of my passion in this whole knife making gig is teaching. I began knife making in what I call the dark years. And what I mean by that is when I would call and ask other then well-known knife makers for information or help, basically I got shrugged off or put off, or it was all a big secret. Part of what I think is Ed Caffrey's appeal is the fact that I'm willing to share, and I share as much as often as I can. Quite frankly, there's no secrets here with me. It's taken me 30 years to get to this point. And in some cases, I've even noticed that when I do tell folks how to do something or how I do something, it's almost like I can see the deer in the headlight look in the tone of their voice. But it's part of my legacy that I want to leave behind. It's part of probably my most favorite thing in knife making, bladesmithing. And it's just a very important aspect of who I am and what I do. Well, I was a newlywed at the time that I began to get interested in custom knives. And you got to remember, I was a kid back then, 18, 19 years old, freshly married. We'd moved to a new location. But being raised a farm kid, I mean, you were always fixing stuff. You were always, I guess, tinkering, for lack of a better term. And that was the time, as most of you well know, when you're first married, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, you're trying to buy groceries, you're trying to pay the rent. I mean, money's hard to come by. And here I was, spending a few dollars here and there on things to further my knife making, or at least at the time I thought I was furthering my knife making. And I remember my wife at one time saying, "Why are you spending money on this? You're just going to do something else next week anyway." Fast forward, well, the very first knife show I ever attended was a little bitty regional show in Illinois. And I showed up with what I consider now some god-awful looking knives. They were just atrocious. But I still remember this, my very first knife sale. It was an elderly gentleman and his wife walked up to my table. I stood up, stammering, spitting, sputtering, just being a kid. And it was about an 8-inch bladed 5160 blade. I had antler scales on it, whitetail antler scales that I had ground the bark off of, and then put like 6 different colors of leather dye on it. So it was like this multicolored atrocity. And I had $100 marked on it at the time. And this man and his wife walked up, asked me if they could look at the knife, and I was like, "Sure, look at the knife." And I will never forget this. I was just hoping that I would sell a knife. This guy looks at his wife and says, "That's a $200 knife if I ever seen one." And remember, I had $100 marked on the knife. This guy brought out 2 $100 bills, laid them down on the table, and says, "I'll take it." About a week later, I still remember my shop was a picnic table in the backyard. And I remember my missus, her eyes got big when that guy threw 2 $100 bills on the table. And about a week later, her comment to me was, "Don't you have something to do with knives?" And it's just gone from there. I mean, quite frankly, at least in this point in my career, the money's not a big deal. I just love what I do and love to share it.